Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, colleagues. First, I would just like to say that protecting our environment is not radical. I want to make sure that's on the record. And my first question will go to Ms. Andrea. Ms. Andrea, I'm sorry, I don't want to mess up your last name, so I will just call you Ms. Andrea. 90% of the Albuquerque metro's areas, that's in my district, metro areas' industrial sources of pollution are located in the South Valley, as well as two federally designated Superfund sites. The South Valley is traditionally a Hispanic, low-income, primarily Spanish-speaking rural part of Albuquerque. According to a 2011 health impact assessment by the Bernalillo County Place Matters team, Hispanic people living there have significantly higher death rates than those in other parts of the county for 10 of 11 leading causes of death, including heart disease and cancer. A litany of research has found correlations between environmental burdens, stress, and premature deaths in communities like the San Jose neighborhood, where life expectancy is 10 years less than those in the rest of Albuquerque, and that's just a small area. I've had neighborhood leaders and residents from the South Valley tell me they want to keep the Superfund sites on EPA's Superfund list. Usually folks want sites in their neighborhood cleaned up and then removed from the list, but in the South Valley, they're so afraid that once the Superfund sites are declared cleaned up, industry will just come back in and start polluting them again. So they see the Superfund designation as protection from all of that. So my question is, can you speak to how the situation is similar to the ones in your communities and other environmental justice communities face, and how the Environmental Justice for All Act will help my South Valley and other such communities break free of these environmental health burdens?
Thank you so much for the question, and interesting to hear that what's happening in the area also is happening out here. I mentioned it a bit in my testimony, but a fight that we had at the San Bernardino airport, the one that we found out about through a newspaper article, was a development on top of a Superfund site that had been supposedly cleaned up, and that they were going to be putting warehouse complexes over. That area actually used to be an Air Force base, and so it was technically public land, and they were going to redevelop it, and they were supposed to redevelop it for the benefit of the community. Instead, it was sold off to a private developer who develops a bunch of industrial sites across the nation. And so we saw it was a perfect opportunity for community to get involved and to decide like what could happen in this area that could greatly benefit an area that didn't have too many access to parks, that don't have access to trees and etc. And on top of it had a Superfund site, but instead sold off and nobody really got to know about it or get involved. And so the EJ for All Act does highlight the importance of not only community engagement, but also to analyze and do something about cumulative impacts. If that area would have had, let's say, the provisions that are in the EJ for All Act, we might have been able to develop something that was in a better use for the community. I mentioned in my testimony about how a lot of the development that happens in this area isn't the unionized jobs that we're talking about. They aren't the high wage jobs. They aren't the cleanest jobs. So a package that we don't get to have. But community here locally is fighting for something that brings in both. And unfortunately, we haven't had the chance to be able to engage, because there's always ways that either it's streamlined or the comments, we're not giving extended time for comments, or even sometimes the analysis that they do, the study areas that they don't do it large enough to actually grab the entire area that's going to be impacted. So I think for an area like yours, the provisions that I had just mentioned would be helpful.
May be enough time. I'll go ahead on my next question. We'll see how far we get. And this would be for Ms. McLean. Sovereign Native nations have a unique government-to-government relationship with the United States. Tens of millions of indigenous people inhabited North America long before European governments sent explorers to seize lands and resources from the continent and its inhabitants. Following the founding of the U.S., our country implemented policies forced Native people from their lands, moved many of our people to places that were much less suitable for sustaining life. And to this day, many tribal communities lack running water, or the water they do have is contaminated by runoff from abandoned mines, or other sources of pollution. As we seek to address the wide range of historical, racial, economic, and environmental injustices that Native Americans have faced and continue to face, are there any particular things that I know are at times limited that you think we need to keep in mind with regard to the special relationship between the U.S. and tribal governments in this act?
I think I heard you, but I would say that we have to respect the sovereignty of the indigenous nations. We have to respect their treaties, and they have to be involved just like any other community, but even for me, even more so, because they are the indigenous people of this land, and they deserve to be represented and to have a greater voice in what the decisions are being made by the federal government. The Environmental Justice for All Act provides for that.
Thank you.
I yield, Chairman.